Hello and welcome to the Happiness Is podcast with me, your host, Bruce Aitchison from Happiness is Egg Shaped. And as is normal at the start of these things, I've got a big silly smile on my face because I am very excited. I've not been here for a while, so I might be a little bit rusty, so bear with me, but I've got an absolute hero on with me. And we are Friday night. It's 7 o'clock, and we'll tell you why that is significant when we get chatting. But if you're going to go, you might as well go big. You might as well go right to the very beginning. I am so excited. I first met this person about a year ago now, and I had the pleasure of a chat and then a bit of a live interview. And since then, I'd like to think we've become buddies, and I've watched a bit of a journey and we're almost at the ticker tape finish, and I'm really excited to see how it goes. So let's not waste any more time because it's not me you're here to listen to. It is the one and the only Sandra Colamartino. Hello there.
Hello, Bruce. Lovely to meet you again on
Uh,
podcast. Really excited to be here.
I'm so excited. Now, when we first met, I have to admit I was a little bit how's this going to go? And it was an absolute joy, and it's been so cool to speak to you over the last year because things have really moved hugely. Now, I'm going to get you to rewind the tape right the way back to the beginning. You were Scotland's first captain, which is a big deal, but I want to know, how did you get to that point? Where did rugby come into your life?
Well, going rewinding even further back, my father used to support Stirling County, and I was a schoolgirl in that area, and so we used to go down. And my dad played rugby on the wing, telling me he was brilliant, of course, and he took me to watch the rugby, and I used to love watching it, and it was a real quality time with just me and my dad. And of course, I couldn't play because I was a girl. It was that straightforward. A long time ago now. So I used to go and watch the boys playing mini rugby and be in the stands watching the guys play, and there was just no girls playing at that moment. So my dad used to throw the ball backwards and forwards to me on the sidelines, like probably about 10 or so. And so I perfected my spin pass on the sidelines. And that was really the start of my kind of love of rugby, really watching it at Stirling County and also watching it on TV, the Six Nations, like we were all, I think lots of people start watching rugby, watching Six Nations.
So, did you realize it wasn't a thing? Did you go and wish you were playing, or did you just accept that girls don't get to play rugby?
Looking back, I don't remember pushing that hard. So clearly, maybe because I think there was a lot of girls maybe that, around Scotland and beyond were just allowed to join in because they maybe were asking a bit harder that question. Honestly, my memory is just complete acceptance that was not something I could do. My dad was like, "That's a shame. Such a shame you're a girl, because if you'd been a lad, I think you'd have been good at this. You could have joined in." So I think there was just a feeling that that was just not what you did. It was a shame, but never mind. And that was really where, for me, that was, I accepted that as that was just a shame, but that was not for me. I was a girl, and that's my memory of it not being like an angry girl. Just that was a shame. That was something I could not do.
And what did you do if you couldn't play rugby? What was your interests?
I mean, at school I did hockey. I remember playing hockey. I remember doing a little bit of running. I then actually took up karate when I was about 12, so I became quite good at the moves. Quick, maybe that was quite good for. I don't know why, if that's useful or not, but it might have helped a little bit. But generally, I didn't really do much more than that at school. And then I went to art college. So. And art colleges, nobody is sporty in art college. We're way too cool. Smoking cigarettes, Marlboros, just hanging out, dyeing our hair, So we were not, I went down a route at 17 where I met a bunch of people that were non-sporty, sort of by definition of being, more theatrical, more arty. So that meant that for about 3 or 4 years, I kind of just forgot about sport whilst I kind of hung out dyeing my hair and wearing Doc Martens. So that was in Dundee, and then, I mean, timing wise, I graduated in 1990, and I always followed the men's rugby. So of course, 90, every rugby player knows, was the Grand Slam, David Soul, Gavin Hastings, Doddy Weir. I mean, that was just, Scotland men were absolutely peaking. And I was, I think, 18, and I was absolutely, or 19, I was absolutely hooked on that. I'd been to Murrayfield with my dad. And then I moved back to Edinburgh. And of course, everyone was mad about rugby. Scotland was in an absolute peak. So can you imagine, like, I saw this little advert in the evening news that was put out by Sue Brodie that was in 1990. And this is the start of my rugby journey, where I saw the advert. In fact, somebody saw it for me and told me about it, and that was the start of when I went along, met Sue Brodie for the first time, and she had put this advert out saying women's rugby beginners welcome, and it was the first ever club side in Scotland. So up until then, it had only been university sides, and of course that's where I'd missed out on that, because I was at an art college and there was no rugby anywhere to be seen up to now.
So when you arrive at that first session, like, did you have boots? Did you like? I'm trying to picture this art college grad.
Let me help you, because honestly, it was horrific, because I had no sports kit, and I actually had, those baseball boots that are like the Stars, long Converse.
Yeah.
I had black Converse baseball boots on, and that was my trainers. And I just kind of thought, I'll go up to these guys trying to look like I know what I'm doing. And it was at Liberton Rugby Club, and there was this bank of about maybe 5 meters down to the pitch. And I just thought, I'll just kind of walk down casually. And I went absolutely flying, because they didn't have any grips. They've got not a single grip. I absolutely fell on my arse in front of these women that I'd never met. And that was probably one of the most embarrassing moments. That it still makes me cringe, because I'd never met them, and there I was trying to just kind of act casual, that this was not a big deal. But for me, it was so exciting to be thinking this was a real thing. And Sue was there when there was maybe about half a dozen people. Lee Coburn was there, Julie people that ended up playing for many years for Scotland.
Legends, yeah.
It was an incredible little gathering, looking back now, because some of that very early members of that team were like me, had seen the advert and felt, people had told them they should be getting along. Lee Coburn, actually a really good example, someone who's over 6 foot, incredibly athletic, ex-swimmer.
Hard as nails as well.
Hard as nails. So from the very beginning, there was people there that were, there was this, as they say, it was the start of a team. It was the start of something very special from 1990 onwards.
So we know about your firsts. Most people know about your first, but I don't think any of us realised you were at the first session as well. I love that you fell on your backside and then you become the captain.
I don't think that was not the first session. It was obviously my first session, but that club, okay. I think Liberton would maybe have been Sue, I maybe joined them after, maybe, I don't know, it could have been 6 months or 3 months. It was certainly at the beginning of the time where Sue was really, her advert did not get hundreds of replies. It got, there was a struggle to try and get 15 players. And so when I remember going down, there was about 8 or 9 people, and I think we exchanged phone numbers, and then every single week Sue kept phoning. I hope you're coming. Are you coming? Are you coming? Because we need everyone. I mean, she was incredibly, everyone that had showed an interest, she kind of made sure they stayed to come. But, they kept coming because she was desperate to get 15 people to play a game. And she'd phoned up Royal Dick Vet College and had said, would you like to play a friendly with my team? And of course, she needed 15. And so I think we had a 10 or 12. And then I remember very clearly that first match against Dick Vet, we didn't have any strips. So we borrowed, can you imagine this, Liberton. We asked them if we could borrow a set of strips. And they said, well, you can have these ones that the Colts have worn. And they had been worn by the under 16s the day before. So absolutely minging, and they smell of Lynx aftershave. Like, they were like dirty, damp, stink of bad aftershave, cheap aftershave, and we put them on, and off we went and played Dick Vet, and incredibly, it was quite a close game. It was something like we lost about 10-0. We just couldn't believe that we actually had a team to get. I think we had 13 players. I don't think we made it to 15. And I think one of the players normally played hockey and literally was on the wing. Just literally hadn't come to a single training session. She was just a friend of someone who I think came to watch and then said, look, you just put that shirt on and you're now a wing. You don't need to do anything, just stand there. And then, of course, that was the start of the team.
Now, so I love the changing room, and whenever I speak to people, I always get to at some point. But what was grab your stuff and disappear, or did you get use of the changing room?
I missed a little bit of that. I think were you just asking about the changing room? It just cut out a second.
Yeah, did you have access to the changing room? Were you given that privilege? So what was that like after the game to go into a changing room having played your first game? I mean, there must have been high as kites.
I honestly, I actually have this memory of, it was Liberton changing rooms. It's quite a real old-fashioned clubhouse. And going into the changing rooms, we were so thrilled. Like, we're just like ecstatic. And I remember going into the shower and I washing my hair, and there was so much mud in it. It like dripped down my face, this mud from my hair, because it had obviously been squashed so much. It was quite a muddy day. And in fact, I may have to tell you my horrendous debut at Scrum Half, because it's a kind of legendary story, this, but I went to put the ball in the scrum, as you do, and someone had said, like, you put the ball in and then you just have to get it back out again. So I had put the ball into scrum, and then I literally went into the tunnel to get it. I didn't go round the back. I just sort of went in. I think I was just overexcited. I sort of went into the tunnel, and like the kind of ref kind of got me by the scruff of the neck, pulled me out and said, no, you've got to go round. You can't go in. So it wasn't that surprising. My hair was quite full of mud, because I think the excitement of the whole thing, I just had forgotten that actually that was not quite what you meant. So that was the level we were at.
I've never seen that. I've never seen a scrum half disappear up the tunnel before. That is gold.
I mean, I don't know what I was thinking, because I did know you didn't do that. I think I just was so excited and I was panicking, and I thought, get the ball out, and I forgot to walk round the side, or go round the corner.
So Sue's obviously played a massive part in not just the life of Scottish women's rugby, but in your life.
Yeah. I mean, Sue was, looking back now, I mean, she's a lifelong friend. A lot of rugby people tend to be. And I think this is part of the reason why I've wanted to share this story in 2000, on the 30th anniversary. The reason why is I've just been thinking that I feel she's not really been recognised yet, because she's quite a quiet person. And she's the type of person that doesn't like a fuss made. But what she did for the women's game 30 years ago, now she is one of these people that says, I did that because I wanted to play, because that was exactly why she wanted a team of players so she could play. So she doesn't think of it as a sort of legacy. And that is often what, I can understand that. But the reality of her doing what she did is allowed and facilitated like a whole generation of people to have and share like their whole rugby life story, in Scotland. And if she hadn't done what she did, never mind the 94 World Cup, it was before that. It was just she got the ball rolling, and of course it would have still happened. There's no question, because there was many other people that would have felt the same. But I think she got the ball rolling. It's maybe helped the game be 5-10 years ahead, and that's reality. So
yeah, absolutely,
and
100%.
that's the bit that I want to share.
There's so many sliding door moments to this whole story, though, because she could have just wanted to play. Like you said, hundreds of other women wanted to play, but they didn't go about the action that she did to put an advert in the paper.
Exactly.
If she'd just tried to do it by word of mouth, maybe only 3 people turned up and then they lost interest. But to put an ad, there's so many tiny little building blocks to this. And you're right, it would have happened. Of course it would have, but we might not have women's games on TV now. It might be 10 years in the future. It's an incredible thing that she did. And also, did she ever express a vision? Did she say, we're going to do this because then we're going to have a Scotland team and then we're going to do, or was she just hoping to play that game against Dick Vitt?
Honestly, I don't think there was any. And that's, I think, where she's, possibly feels like a bit overwhelmed with the amount of interest, because she wasn't thinking like that. And we've talked about this. She was thinking about wanting to play, and she was no longer a member of the university. And so she had to form a club. And then we had to, it led to like, well, we now have a team, we need to play in a league, and every step, every increment. And then obviously you've got this team of players like Lee Coburn and Donna Kennedy. Suddenly you're like, well, we want to play, so each layer has just like over a period of time sort of evolved. But she, didn't go with a plan, when she put that advert in the evening news. And looking back, especially there's been a lot of reflection when we've been working on this project, the 30th anniversary play. The reflection has been that, it wasn't planned, and it just unfolded. And unfortunately for her, and fortunately for Scottish women's rugby, she was there, and she was that little bit older and wiser, and she had the skill set to not be too phased about talking through, we need to form a union, we need to do this, and the sort of thing that honestly I think I would have struggled with. She just was like, we just need to form a committee, we need to ask permission. She just because of her perhaps a bit more maturity than we were young 20-year-olds. She was just towards, she was late 20s, so she had more experience. She was a manager at a leisure centre. So, she was used to dealing with, I suppose, the admin that would be involved with procedures. And so she wasn't too phased with the process that was required to sort of deliver, those first steps of forming a union. And that I think it unfolded, I suppose, quite quickly, rapidly over, between 90 and 94. It was quite a quick series of events that happened. But I don't think Sue at 1990, when we were wearing those grotty Liberton shirts, could have imagined what might have unfolded within 4 years.
And in those 4 years, not so much, I don't want to focus too much on the negativity that you probably received, but there was just a complete lack of knowledge. People didn't know. How on earth did you raise the profile? How did you spread the word to get from those 8 or 9 that were there that first session?
I mean, it was literally that advert because there's no mobile phones. Then it was word of mouth, so someone like Lee Coburn's a good example. She's quite a vocal Edinburgher. She had, she was larger than life, working as a manager at the Commonwealth Pool. Imagine her going back saying, I've started doing this women's rugby. And then she was looking and she probably, asked a few friends, you'd be good at rugby. And so the people that joined that first advert were probably, looking, and we were aware that we needed other people. So one led to another, word of mouth. And I have to say, looking at the early photos, the people that played and, that came for those first few sessions, they played for 10 years because we had this incredible camaraderie that I've tried to explain it when we've been researching this play, but it is actually I think the closest thing would be being part of an army.
Yeah.
And, I'm not a military person. You probably know this yourself. You've just done Doddy Weir, that thing that, like going to Rome, you get this bond when you do something collectively that's for the greater good, that brings a sort of, band of brothers, band of sisters vibe. So I think very early on, looking back, we were a band of sisters that had, because the odds were not in our favor. Things were being done for the first time. We were getting, comments maybe about kind of there's something weird that we're doing what we're doing. You get shouted at, I mean, there was a lot of, we were quite easy targets to be ridiculed. So that brings with it a huge connection. You're part of, don't diss us. And so it brought with it, the group of women were very protective of each other really early on, I think, because we were suddenly absolutely bonded that don't make any comment to any of our team because we absolutely are part of the same, our DNA is now completely and utterly committed to being together and doing this now. So I do think that was part of probably the era that we were in, because when you do anything for the first time, you are a little bit isolated perhaps, but it brings with that, it brings a huge connection with the people that you're with.
It's a bit like you hear it often about being in the trenches, and that was, let's not belittle being in the trenches, but you know what I mean. Yeah. You were fighting for something. You had a similar goal. You probably had to help each other out. You would each have had dark moments where you had to lift each other, and then moments where you disagreed, but you took someone's vision, probably Sue's. So you then start getting closer towards this union. I mean, it baffles me. How do you go about forming a union? Because you needed that to be an international, didn't you?
Well, yeah. I mean, the sort of timeline on it really is that Sue started that club. Obviously, the women's club, we had no one to play against, so she knocked on the door of the universities, who were by this point, they had a league of university clubs playing each other, and they would also play north of England. And so Sue basically knocked on the door and wouldn't take no for an answer, and said, we're going to have to join your league. And Kim Littlejohn actually was universities at that time. And, Kim and Sue's first relationship, was possibly a little bit tense because, I think Kim was like, no, we don't. It was just an awkward thing that was happening. But anyway, they, I think Sue just wouldn't take no for an answer. And anyway, it was suddenly, our club was allowed to join the league. Otherwise, as Sue explained, who are you going to play when you graduate? So anyway, that was resolved, and then everything was great. We were able to join that and play in the university union, and the university were already playing in the North of England division. So there was already this kind of crossover to the border. And at that time in England, they had formed a rugby union. So actually Scotland first just joined the sort of British union, which was the kind of English rugby union. Yeah. It was sort of to cover the whole of the UK. So Sue joined that union. I'm not going to call it the English Rugby Union because I don't want to be wrong, because it was covering Wales and Scotland. But I think it felt very much like the English Union when Sue would go to the committee meetings. And so I think after a couple of years of that, I think Sue made that, well, the start of that move and shift away to say, why are we traveling down to England to discuss, things that are probably easier to sort of sort in Scotland? So she then formed the Scottish Rugby Union and broke away, I think much to their kind of surprise and a little bit distaste, but broke away and formed the Scottish Rugby Union and Scottish Women's Rugby Union. And I think there was a little sort of, ooh, at the committee meeting, and didn't expect that. So that again was Sue doing what she does best, which just like, I'm not going down to England to tell them what I'm doing. I'll just start my own union. And that was literally how the Scottish Women's Rugby Union was formed. And Sue, of course, being the instigator to that. And that, of course, meant that it paved the way for what was to come. I mean, we didn't know at that time what was to come, but around, I think it was 91 that happened. It's around a very, similar time. Might have been, yeah. And she made the decision at that point that it was a definite mutual agreement with the Scottish Rugby Union. She approached to became associate. No, God, it's either associate or affiliate. I'm the terrible. Hold on, I've literally got. I'm going to fact check this for you. It's associate. To get this wrong would be horrific. That's how scared I am of Sue.
Yeah, you don't want to mess with somebody that marches all the way down to England by herself to.
Yeah, so I've actually got the timeline on the programme. So here we go. An unofficial, the Scottish Rugby Union is formed in 1992 by Sue Brodie. Okay, and she then got in touch with Scottish Rugby and asked or suggested by mutual agreement that they become associate members. And that allowed what was to follow in 94, the fact that we weren't a merged union. It meant that the Scottish Women's Rugby Union could do exactly what it pleased at that very critical point in sort of women's rugby history, when the sanctions were stopping Netherlands hosting the 94 World Cup, and they literally had to pull out because they were full joint members with the men. And because of that decision by Sue, without realizing at the time, by not becoming completely encapsulated with the SRU, it meant that there was nothing in that bar in Leith. There was nothing to stop her saying, "We'll just host it. We can host it." And actually, looking back, the SRU, the relationship with the SRU was always good, because it was always clear as to what the boundaries were, and what there was no feeling of us being stopped doing what we wanted. And when Sue asked for help in 94, when we had 90 days to organize this event, the first person she called was Gregor Nicholson from the SRU, saying, "We need a hand." And he said, "No problem. What can I do?" And within that capacity, the remit they had, obviously they couldn't put money in because that was absolutely, there was no funding. All the funding was not for the women, but they were able to offer, they phoned Jim Fleming and he arranged all the refereeing. They just said, "We'll sort the refereeing." And I think they also put a call out to all the Scottish clubs saying, "Please help these women, please facilitate them." And so that's when Kelso, and a lot of the clubs that host west of Scotland, the reason why they were so welcoming was because the SRU had absolutely endorsed, and encouraged them to help the women's game out at that point. And, a lot of people, possibly, and probably including myself, having not really known until we've researched the play, have maybe been a bit, thinking there was some sort of, a sort of, and, there was not a good feeling there. But looking back, Sue said, no, it was actually, they were incredibly supportive. In the reality was that, of course, was no money, because the money was all allocated to the men's game at that point because it was the Scottish Rugby Union. So it wasn't like there was money for the women that wasn't going that way. That's why we had to buy our own shirts. All of that was, very difficult for everybody, but there was not a feeling of the Scottish Rugby Union had, there was no lack of support from them, in the same way here we are now, I think just working, now they're affiliated. For us, we were side by side, we were side by side with the love of rugby and trying to make things happen.
I love it. I didn't know that. That is a good thing to say, because I think a lot of people would have felt there was probably opposition there. So
Yeah.
before you get to that meeting in Leith, you've played an international and you got to be captain. How did that come around? What made you captain material? How do you bestow that honour on someone for such a momentous occasion?
So how that happened, I guess, just rewinding a fraction before, we were now playing club rugby. We've moved to Edinburgh Accies. That squad, I would say that we're the Accies team, a good half a dozen, if not 8 players were part of the Scotland team. So when the trials were held, and of course, by that point, the whole of the UK had been invited to the trials because we'd involved a coach in London called Mark Francis, and he'd rounded up the exiles. And then there was the Scotland trials, the full Scottish trials that became the first international, the one you're referring to in Edinburgh, Ireland, Scotland, 93. At that point, I suppose, it's ridiculous, been playing for 3 years. But looking back, every single player was getting their first cap, and there was a lot of inexperience in the team. So I suppose what we'd had is at least, 3 years worth of playing together with a lot of the same squad that were in Accies, that were winning things. Of course, we beat all the university students, I might add. Like we were a very strong side, because every time a good player graduated, they joined Edinburgh Accies. So Kim Littlejohn became, from Edinburgh University, part of Accies. And every time, a player left the university, they would join us. And Donna Kennedy, I think she played at one point for, there was this team just kept building momentum and strength. So I was fortunate. I was the captain of that team for a number of years. And I think just having that connection with that club, and that club playing, a really heavy part of the first international, was why I was very lucky and honoured to be selected as captain. And I think it was partly because I've been captaining the club for quite some time. And the position of scrum half, you are sort of in the middle to hear what everyone's going on, talk to the forwards and the backs. Actually, I remember so clearly my father saying to me that day, like, he just gave me this massive hug. He was so proud because he is a rugby man. And he said, no matter what happens, if you never play again, you'll be on every single bit of paper, because you're now a history. You're in the history books because it's the first. And I remember not really understanding what that meant until, later on. And he literally had tears in his eyes. He was such a proud, it was quite a proud moment on a personal level. And then actually very, very soon after that, I literally had one captaincy cap, and very soon after, Roddy and Mark both decided that Kim Littlejohn was actually a better fit, playing at centre, further back, also incredibly, really good at reading the game, probably better than I was, to be fair. I was often getting my head down, getting too involved with the details of trying to get the ball out. And I think Kim, reading the game, also great at talking to players, and everyone respected Kim. So shortly after that, she became the captain, and then remained the captain, for her, I think, I might be wrong, but I think for maybe the whole time she played. Certainly for the vast majority, she was captain, and she made a phenomenal captain. And we were, all really lucky to have her at an absolute peak, because she's a real someone that she just has so much respect by everybody, because you wanted her on your side, because she's so hard as nails. I mean, the way she tackled, you just, you couldn't have a better captain in terms of, someone who is sort of leading by example. And so, I think I feel incredibly honoured to have had that, the privilege of leading. But I was very comfortable with the change to Kim shortly after. In fact, I sort of honestly remember feeling a bit relieved, because when you're trying to play a game, it's a hell of a lot to do. Never mind worrying about all the PR and marketing, which we do touch on the play, because Kim was really thrown in the deep end, and had to sort of do media appearances. We were all so young looking back, and she just had to get on with it all.
You don't mess with Kim.
No.
So the Sue's going down to England now.
Yeah.
I think we have to try and get some context here, because
Yeah.
at the moment we're probably thinking, "Oh, how hard can that be?" There's no Zoom. There's no internet. She's traveling to these meetings. She's then coming back. She's telling everybody what's going on. I would imagine largely by word of mouth again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then this momentum is beginning to build. You're in the league, but a lot of this, I'm guessing, is coming out of your own pocket. People are paying for these things themselves. That must have, there must have been a loss of people through the demand of it on top of life. Things weren't easy. Money was, you were having to outlay your own cash. So how did you keep hold of people? Was it just that camaraderie? Was that what glued people together?
I mean, I think the camera, we all wanted to play. When you got on the pitch and played, it was worth every hassle that came with it. The hassle involving, you just touched on, the communication. I do remember, as I'm a graphic designer, and I remember I always got roped into doing these. We used to do an annual handbook, which had everybody's phone number in it. I'm talking for the Scottish Rugby Union. It's a little A5 booklet, and it would have every club, and it would have every phone number of three names to contact, the secretary, the captain, because this was the only way to be able to phone up, because you had to phone up before the game. Is the game still on? Is it cancelled? Is it, and so the only way to communicate was through this little A5 handbook. So once a year we would duly put together this, it was horrific, put together this bloody piece of, and then, you're trying to, and then some bloody person had changed, hadn't they? And then they've left, and then someone, that phone number was they've moved house, and you were constantly trying to keep this little handbook up to date, so that when the league matches were announced, if there was a, because, can you imagine? Then there's the weather's bad, a flood, the pitch is cancelled, and then everyone's having to phone and rearrange a fixture and all this stuff. I mean, looking back, it was horrific. And the only people that were doing that was in every club and up and down the country. Every club had to have these poor people, on the committee, that were bothering to bloody do all the details, which was to update and phone in the result. Because someone plays a game, you need to know what the score was. So then you need to phone out what was the score. Oh, so that person's forgot to phone in, right? Honestly, it was heinous looking back. Luckily, actually, I've forgotten all that until you've said. But each club in Scotland, of course, not just Accies, we were all having to do that with each other, and that was for the love. Look at it. That was the love of the game. It was so that you could play the game you loved, and every club in Scotland had a group of women who had found something they enjoyed doing and would make it happen. And it got easier and easier, because it was so horrendous to begin with. As technology improved things, of course, it became a little bit easier as well, because emails, suddenly things did make that was a huge thing to be able to email. information around the place.
So you're preparing for World Cup.
Mm.
You're expecting to travel to World Cup.
Mm.
How was the planning for that? Because before we get to the World Cup's off, what
Mm.
sort of preparation had you been going through up to that point, and then how did you find out that they've pulled the plug?
So after the Scotland Ireland game, I mean, there was a series of friendly internationals. Well, I don't think it was quite a Five Nations, but you know, our coaches would put dates in the diary for playing Wales or Ireland, and England, because we all knew that the Holland 98, 94 World Championship, World Cup was actually quite 18 months away. So there was a plan in place to build the momentum from us having now a national team that we would then want to play maybe 3 or 4 times before going to that World Cup. So literally from that Ireland game, there was, Roddy and Mark, the coaches, they would pull together a schedule of like, we're going to play Wales, then we're going to play England. They had like this schedule of games prepped before the tournament. So we all went away. We had a summer training program. We would have maybe like different dates in the diary where everyone would come together, not dissimilar to now, where everyone's playing for their clubs all over the country. And then every so often there was these arranged dates where we would all meet up and train as a squad. And then there would be potentially an international friendly. So that was all completely diarised. And it was very much, I mean, it was a properly, we were, by that point, we were up and running. We'd had a national team. We were good to go. We had phenomenal coaching that were, free of charge, giving their time for the love of it. We started to get a kit sponsor. We were beginning to feel really like going places. So that was the build up really until January 1994. So that was, of course, the fateful fax coming to Sue in her office in Edinburgh.
I would love to have. Well, I wouldn't, because it would be horrible. But I can't imagine how she felt reading that. She must have had to read it again and again, and then the emotion that must have swept over her, holding a bit of paper, and there's potentially people watching or listening to this who won't have a clue what a fax is. Never mind anything else. But she got that. What was the immediate chain of events from her receiving that?
Well, we've talked about that just very recently, and she remembers getting that fax. She was in her office, and she said she can't quite remember how long it took her, but I think she phoned me and like 3 or 4 other people that she just had to tell. And she thinks she can't remember if it was like the same day or a couple of days. It might have been the same day, but I think she'd said, like, let's say it was Tuesday, let's meet on Wednesday. Like a day later, it was like, let's meet in Leith in a bar because we need to discuss what we're going to do. And I'm not fully sure the exact many hours passed, but it would have been within a day or 2 or 3 at the most, because I think as she read it, the first reaction would have been, this is like us all, devastation. But I think very quickly her, the things were churning in her head very quickly, because by the time we met in that bar in Leith, she had that plan formulated in her head. She told us what she intended to do or what she thought she wanted to discuss hosting the event. So we, it wasn't a debate. She called us there because she had kind of figured out what she was going to say, which was, I've been thinking about this and I think we should host. I think we should say we can do it. And literally, I mean,
do you know what? There's that stereotype of, and you see it sometimes. It comes up. Someone will have no good story ever starts with "I was having a salad." These so many rugby stories start with we were in a bar, or we
Yeah.
were in the clubhouse, or we were having a beer, but not many of them finish with, and then we made a World Cup.
I mean, looking back, I think that she came with that idea, and because we were in a pub, I think we need another drink, don't we, to sort of think this through. And I think the more beers we had, the more absolutely sure we were it was a brilliant idea. And that's my sort of fond memory of it, is that I remember I went to that bar. I did not know that was what she was going to say. But by the time we got out of that bar, we were so bloody excited that we were going to still play rugby at the World Cup. It was just this awkward, annoying thing that we were having to organise it, but that is all going to be fine. And
There must have been so many waking up the next morning, kind of rubbing your eyes, going, "Hang on, are we going to organise a World Cup?"
Honestly, I don't think. I mean, looking back, seriously, joking apart, we were not drunk. We were actually we were literally going, "Oh my God," because when I look back at who she called, it was quite a strategic call to arms, because the people that was maybe sort of 6 of us that were called, and looking back, we all could do something useful to make it happen. Roddy, I'm sure, was there, the coach, and then myself, my then partner at the time, worked in a bank, like your treasurer. Sandra, you're a designer. That's all the programs. Janine, you're a nurse, right? That we need to sort out ambulances. We need Maureen. We're going to need volunteers. We're going to need to grab. Basically, she had already the cogs had been working, and she was pretty much, starting to explain her strategy of how this was going to happen, because there was, and so then I think literally the next day, having all agreed that we were up for it, she then faxed all the countries, and there's this famous fax, because a couple of people have framed it, which says,
"Oh, really?"
The tournament in the Netherlands has been cancelled, but Scotland are going to host it. Please accept, or please let us know if you're going to coming, as soon as possible. And that was the fax that I think England have got it in their history, as part of the, because it's that fax changed the history of the Women's World Cups, because the call the call went out across the nations, and 12 countries responded with a yes, which was incredible and terrifying, and everything all rolled into one. Because then it was like, holy shit!
It's so mad though, because
Mad, yeah.
Now, I'm not belittling this at all. It was on your doorstep, but for other countries to go, yeah, let's go to something that's being thrown together in 90 days and hope that it works. That you said it before, that kind of sisterhood, people you'd never met were part of that and have gone, yeah, we're going for it, because like you said, we just want to play. We're going to do what we can because we want to play. And this play that you've written and you're about to put on, of course it's for you, and it's for the characters who will be portrayed, and it's for the people who are sitting in the audience, but it goes much further than that.
It does, because I mean, the gamble, which ended up being a good one, was these countries must be as devastated as we are. They must feel the same. Let's see, because actually Holland is really near Edinburgh. Like, it's a connecting flight. It's 1 hour. If you're coming from Canada, or you're coming from the US, or you're coming from, you can get a connection, from Schiphol to Edinburgh quite easily. So that was the calculation, that they will be as gutted as us. They will have flights to Schiphol, to Amsterdam. What we're asking them to do is get one onward flight and to change their accommodation. We're not changing the dates. So I think, and being, Sue's decision to, you could not delay sending that fax. It had to be quick. I mean, looking back, what would we have done if it had 6 replies? It might have been really tough. But the fact that there wasn't 12 teams in the end, but initially there was 12 that said that said yes, including us. And we could kind of bank on England, Ireland, and Wales, and we thought France, we were fairly comfortable that they would come. So then you think, well, that's us got 4 or 5. It's just going to be a measure of what will happen with the overseas countries that like Japan, Russia, Kazakhstan, whether they would pull out. And that was the thing that we were not sure of. And of course, as history has shown, they just went no problem. Yep, that's fine. We're coming still.
No problem. So you fast forward now. A lot has happened in the women's game, and I know a lot of the current crop of players who are phenomenal athletes and role models, and a lot of them had no clue to any of this, no clue to the story. They didn't know the names. They grew up watching Scottish male internationals and probably pretending to be them or watching them, and they didn't know. There's been a big bit of connecting the past and the present and bringing the people in the middle into it as well. And now it's the sisterhood's just grown, hasn't it?
And there's something wonderful happening. I've got such a good feeling about this current squad because I see in them what we had I was very lucky to be around that kind of when a team, I always describe things like they're a bit like, waves. So you get peaks and troughs. And when a momentum goes up like this, you can feel it in your bones. And like I was lucky, between 93 and 98, that there was a real period of Scotland just on the rise. And I think I see it again with this current group because I see a real parallel in history because when we were in 93, I would say England were about 5 or 6 years ahead of us because they had just been doing it for longer. We were on our first caps at the World Cup. I think in the program, everyone's got 3 caps. And the England team, they've all got 12, 15 caps. They had just had these extra years in them that you need. You can't just be the same as someone if you've got a cap and versus someone who's got 15 caps. And when I look at the current squad and I see, the parallel with how long the England team have professional players and how, they're probably 5, 6 years in it, where Scotland are now parallel doing the same, having the same level of support and development now with professional full-time players. And you feel it that because what is great to know what's coming is that England don't get any better. And all that happens is Scotland can come up and they can really, because they'll then start to have people retiring and things go in waves. And what you've got, if you've got a group of players who are at the same time, sort of developing at the same, and seeing the improvements, if any time a squad of players can come through and they can just do things that maybe 10 years ago you couldn't have imagined because it's timing, and I do think that this squad right now, having, I've met a few of them in the last year and I've just seen a change. I see a change in attitude. I think the most recent game against France, they were absolutely gutted. As in, they thought that was one that got by. They were gutted about not beating a team that's 3rd ranked in the world. I mean, come on. Look, that's the difference. If you'd asked them that question 3 years ago, they'd be thrilled at how it was quite close. So they're in a different place and there's way more to come, in my view. And I do see a lot that we can, I think just this whole anniversary thing has allowed perhaps a lot of it conversations, with old and younger players coming through, which it's got to be healthy because I feel that the English Roses are maybe 5 years ahead as well at how well the old girls have supported the young girls. At the World Cup, they were all there and they have this, Jill Burns, led by Jill Burns, they're incredibly, like, they've done all that, and I think it's looking at it, I think the Scotland Thistles led by Kim and Beth McLeod, and this is really important because how dare Jill Burns and her crew have won over our Scottish girls? We've got better old girls than they. We've got their back more. We've done a
That's a,
play.
that is some fighting talk. The first time we met,
Yeah.
Rona Lloyd and Lisa Thompson were
Mm.
there, and I feel I've been privileged to be part of quite a lot of moments that are big to me, maybe not big in the grand scheme of things, but there was a definite awakening in them when they met you, of what had gone before. And I know I've spoken to Emma Wassell about this, and various others. I know Brian Eason takes it very seriously about telling the story and them knowing what's happened before them, not where they've come from, but what's happened before them. And I love seeing the energy that it brings and the spark that it brings, not just to the current players, but to you guys as well. And now you've got this play, and it's come around in an amazing way, which we will talk about. But the first question I want to ask you is, how on earth did you go about choosing the actors for it? How did that happen?
Well, that process, actually, we have done so well with our crowdfunding and sponsorship, that has allowed us to hire a professional director. And so Sue and I sat in on the casting, but quite frankly, it was not to do with us, because I was looking for kind of Demi Moore kind of vibes.
That was what I was going to say. Who was the most vain about the whole thing?
Kind of thinking G.I. Jane, like Demi Moore. I had that in my head, and but quite frankly, it was nothing to do with us. And there was the one thing that I will, not a spoiler, but they nearly all have long hair. We made a decision early on that they couldn't really look like us, quite frankly. For most people look a lot more attractive than us, and they all have long hair, and so there was no way we could really replicate our look in the 1994 sort of short hair kind of like look that we've got. The director felt that it was far better to cast the most talented and good young people that are there in Scotland today. So the looky-likey thing went out the window, which let's say we've had an upgrade, like without a doubt. Sue is bloody done brilliant. Sue's now blonde, I have to say. Always wanted to be blonde. I've got long hair, which is quite nice to see. So we've all slightly, we're very much representing. My character is very much representing that girl that was never allowed to play, and the one that really is the same as Sue, because her character is, without Sue, there would have been no World Cup. So really that one lies through, and there is quite a bit of artistic license on my character and Kim and Annie, one of the first players as well, where we're trying to sort of give a little snapshot of the type of why rugby meant so much to different types of women. So there has to be, within that storyline, we've had to allow Kim Miller, the writer, to, really make it a really good hours show where the characters have got to have a little bit of contrast. So I would say the facts are absolutely accurate. Some of it perhaps is a little bit of artistic license, thrown in as well.
So let's give the story then. So the World Cup was thrown together in 90 days. Oh, I shouldn't say that. It was planned in 90 days.
Thrown together, actually, is more accurate.
Where, how, what, all those questions. A play, why a play? Why not a book? How did this thing come around?
Very quickly, I first thought I bought books, and I did a course on. I started a course doing screenwriting, thinking I want to write it I saw it as a film. After doing a few months of this sort of evening classes, lockdown happened. I also had enough knowledge that this wasn't going to happen in my lifetime, because I run a full-time business, and I just thought it's way too big a task. I'd done enough. I'd learned enough to know that was never going to happen. So I then, after lockdown, I went on a solo cycle up to the Hebrides, and I just kind of had a week on my own, trying tossing around and feeling, how could I make this happen? And I literally came back and thought, oh my God, what about a play? Because 1 hour, we could do that. We're in Edinburgh. It could be, it's something that we could do. I don't know how. And honestly, thinking amateur dramatics at this point, like maybe we'll be in it. Don't know. Like, we phoned up Edinburgh. I phoned up Sue. She thought it was a great idea and said very sensibly, let's try and raise some money crowdfunding. And if there's nobody wanting to donate, then it's a terrible idea. And if people donate, then we kind of know we're onto something. So we raised £10,000 in 80 days, which told us we were onto something. And then around that time was when people kept saying, you need to talk to Ed, you need to talk to Ed Crozier. And his name kept popping up in conversations. So I gave him a call. And then that, of course, led to, because we've now got a bit of money here. He was like, that's absolutely nowhere near enough to put on a show, because if you're going to do it, you might as well do it properly. And he had, I think that kind of knowledge and encouragement, would you have known how much it would cost to put on a show? Probably not. So I'll tell you, a lot. And I have to just name check, if you don't mind, that without the support of the Bill McLaren Foundation, who came in as a really early sponsor, and so did Levy and McRae lawyers in Glasgow. They were the two that came in straight within that critical period, around sort of September, October, where we knew that we needed to raise quite a lot more money. They came in when we really didn't have much to go on apart from us sort of saying what we were trying to do. And then laterally, we've also had two phenomenal sponsors. One is by the Scottish Brain Science, which is part of the SRU, thing to do. Partly because they're brain testing us because we're over 50, head injuries, and every time they do a brain test, we talk about the play. So I think we've worn them down. They've come in as a sponsor. And then finally, Culverwell, which is one of our original shirt sponsors in the 90s. Wow. Now, the poor guy, he had no choice because he was getting phoned every single day by Sarah Float from Edinburgh Accies. And she just would not let him go until he eventually said, you're the most persistent person that's ever phoned. Like, what will it take to make you go away? So we got a shirt sponsor is now the kit sponsor of the costume. So, Brilliant. By hook or by crook, we got there. And none of this would have happened without the Edinburgh Ackie Old Girls. Which is not just Scotland players by any means. It's the Vicky Mendelssohns. It's the guys, Fee Glasgow, people that were our club mates who we just, Sue and I phoned them up, started a WhatsApp group and said, would you help us organise this? Because we do not have the right skill set and you guys have marketing experience, sponsorship experience. Basically, you can help us get some money in and also help us run the place. And we also got an old girl, Trine, I call her one woman Rami, but she is the treasurer. She's looking after all the money. So, between us, it's like the old Accies gang is back doing what it does best, annoying people, raising money, not taking no for an answer. And here we are, a week to go. We've got the money in the bank. We've been able to hire the professionals. So, it's proper stuff now. And it's now, out of Edinburgh Accies, out of us acting to professionals at the Traverse Theatre. So who would have thought that could have happened? But who would have thought a World Cup could have happened as well? So.
I know. I reckon you guys could change the world. Let's get you all into Parliament and see if you can shake up the whole country. So there's the famous, or one of the famous speeches from the 97 Lions where Ian McGeechan says, in 30 years' time, you'll be walking down the street and there'll just be a look. And that's what this sounds like. You put out the rallying call, and I think everybody would have just said yes without a moment's hesitation, because you're right. It's not just the Scotland players. You're telling everyone's story here. This is a big deal. Yeah. You're on next week. The reason I commented about 7 o'clock, us having this conversation, is because that's 1 week away from curtain up and proper showtime.
Mhm.
you've been busy. You run your own business. You're doing this, which is probably a full-time job on top of that.
Mhm.
What when you sit in that seat next Friday, surrounded by some of your oldest friends, people
Mm.
that you've been through all this with,
Mm.
curtain goes up. Have you any clue what that's going to feel like?
I'm sort of visualizing, like in my head. I'm not visualizing anything other than it just being a phenomenally good show and a great night, and one that you remember for the rest of your life. Like the World Cup. That's what I'm visualizing, because I think that the stars are aligning. I feel that. I just feel it in my bones. Um, I think I just feel we've got people flying over from New Zealand. The World Cup, England World Cup winning captain is flying over from New Zealand. Karen Almond and Jill Burns, they're all coming up. They're using this as a chance for them to remember winning the World Cup. So other people are using it for their own, for their own kind of opportunity to embrace, some of these amazing things that happened. We've got Annie, who's one of the ones that we're representing as an actor. She's flying in from New Zealand. When I see who's coming, the World Rugby, someone's coming from there. There's people coming from all over the place. I think we've managed to capture something where people are really intrigued, and they want to see what it's all about. And the resounding thing that I keep hearing is that most people don't know the story, and they're genuinely wanting in a week's time to, like, sort of see what happened because they don't know it. And that was the mission, was to share the story, as simple as that. And I think I've got a feeling something more is going to happen, because I think that it's hopefully going to make a connection with this current squad, that this is way beyond, this privilege that you have to wear that shirt, what it means, and how you'll have it for the rest of your life. And if we do a small amount towards motivating them to feel that they know that the whole of Scotland has their back, then we've done something really powerful. And we'll also have an absolute blast seeing everyone that we used to hang around with. So but actually it's about the future. It's about, before we're too old and we can't remember it, and we can't actually, at the moment I'm gathering together all the photos for the program, and they're still, we're still young enough to be able to sort of get them downloaded off and put them and archive them. I'm actually was speaking to Scottish Rugby this afternoon, because we've done a milestone, like all the dates from 90 to 2025. And I found a piece of nugget today that it was actually 1962 when the first Scottish university side, Edinburgh University, actually was before us in 90. So who knew? So we've got a chance to pull together the whole of the history of the Scottish women's game and use it in a sort of, in a way that perhaps will be the archive for the future, and maybe some of this will end up being in the Scottish Rugby as a bit of, we're capturing our history whilst we remember it.
It's just absolutely incredible. I feel a little bit emotional. I think you've had little moments as we've gone along and spoken. I thought you summed it up beautifully there in so many ways. You summed up the game of rugby there, of people coming together, just wanting to enjoy it, but inspiring the future, how important it is to enjoy the moment. If you can look into that crystal ball, there's no way you could have predicted where the game is now when you rocked up to that session at Liberton, or played in your first international, or played in the first World Cup. I don't think you could have imagined what had happened. Or maybe you could, and maybe you wanted it to happen quicker. But when you look into your crystal ball in 10 years' time, when it's the 40th anniversary, what can you see?
Gosh. Honestly, I could see Scotland winning a Grand Slam in the next 10 years. I could see them being in the top 4, 5 in the world. I could see them like we feel about the Scotland men, you know, there's a feeling like, yeah, they could beat anyone on a good day. I see that in the future, and that's within the next 10 years. I see a feeling that the Scottish women will be on an equal platform with the rest of the world countries, because the infrastructure that's happening now, you know, the players will change. That's the whole point. You know, 10 years time, some of these girls will be retiring, but you know, if we're building something strong coming through, that's the wonderful thing about rugby, isn't it? You know, that a team like, look at England, you know, they're invincible, and then suddenly they get beaten. So, you know, I see Scotland being, in 10 years time, within the 10 years to come, being absolute contenders to win the World Cup. Why not? Absolutely, I see that.
Did you get swept away with the Lionesses? That was probably the pinnacle of women's sport. It was almost the perfect storm. It was a beautiful summer. It was in this country. It was. Did you enjoy that? Did you look at that and think, I'd like a piece of that for us, please?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, I look back and wish I'd gone, because I think it was really exceptional for the people that flew out there. I mean, I watched it, you know, got up in the middle of the night and watched it. And the final, I mean, honestly, it was emotional. It was just, you know, honestly sort of teary to see these packed stadiums. And actually, I genuinely did feel sorry for, you know, it was one of those games. It was an absolute thriller, you know, just what you want for a World Cup final. And actually, anyone that's played back in these olden days, you know, in the early days, it is emotional. It's emotional to see this incredible energy and see how far things have come. And it's not about wanting to be there, because it isn't. You know, I think the men when you know, the ones that were professional, you know, you can't undo your own history. It is just what it is, and you love it for what it was. But I do look now, and it's just actually wonderful to see. That's actually the overriding feeling. I just get such a thrill at seeing all these women, you know, and even the young girls, you know, that are so keen on the sport. And you think, God, you're only 8 and you're so stoked. What are you gonna be like when you're 18? Never mind 28, you know. And that is a thrill. It's a total thrill to sort of watch that unfold.
Can you see us filling out Murrayfield for a women's international?
I certainly can see us filling out the Hive next weekend. I think it is with the England game. I think that's very close to capacity. I think you've got to watch, because there's something beautiful about a tight crowd.
Yeah.
And you know, also, let's not get ahead of ourselves. You know, there's a beautiful atmosphere with these games that I think you want to protect that, you know, in terms of feeling intense. There's something, I think that there'll come a point, yes, where if there's more and more people, it will get bigger. But I think there is probably a challenge at the moment from going from the Hive to anything bigger without it feeling like somehow
you lose the atmosphere.
So also, I think if the women are paying their way, you know, the tickets are not free, everything's sold out, and it's at the right price. At the Hive, it's got lots of, or Hive Stadium, I think, not the Hive. I don't know. I think it's about the women paying their way. I would have thought that would be their first mission. And it has to, when I saw the game last weekend, you know, there is a hugely mixed crowd of young people and just guys that are watching it. And it feels like there could definitely be, especially if the women are successful, because everyone loves to watch a team that might win. So I think it does go hand in hand. It's been proven, hasn't it? When the men play well, you know, the tickets are harder to get than if they're going through a bit of a doldrum. So it's all connected. And I do think these women are absolutely in a sort of the start of it, or they're still on an upward trajectory at this point.
Yeah, I hate this phrase, but it's a good product. It's worth watching. And I think it's, like you say, I think it's going to continue to, when you see some of the young players coming through, and we're still missing one or two, so there's still absolutely a chance for it to get better. Sandra, I've absolutely loved it. I could talk for a very long time. This bit I didn't tell you. So I need you to finish the sentence. So for
Okay.
me, happiness is egg-shaped, but for
Oh God.
Sandra, happiness is...
Happiness is a premier sellout show next with nobody breaking a leg next Friday.
I think we'll all take that. Thank you so much. I look forward to
Yeah.
seeing you in the flesh soon.
Yeah, I'm sorry you missed
Congratulations
the
on
show, but thank you.
everything up to this point.
Yeah.
It's just, I think your story is amazing. I think there's more to tell. You're going to have to come back on for part 2.
Final plug. You can live stream the show if you go to our website, because it is a sellout, and you can make a donation and you can actually see you can see the show. We're doing a live stream on the Saturday after the women take on England. So if anybody did want to, they've missed out on tickets, if they just Google 90 days play, they'll find out how to make a donation and watch the show live.
Awesome. We'll put that on all the blurb that goes with this
No
stuff
problem.
so that people can do it. That is amazing. Sandra, all the
Bruce.
best. I've got no doubt it's going to be amazing. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
See you soon.
Thank you.
How good. That was long, and it could have been a lot longer. So there's definitely going to have to be a part 2. We're going to have to find out how it went. Please make sure you tune in. If you've not got tickets, then the live stream, you're going to have to see it, because people are going to be talking about it. She's put in a load of work, just like they did to make the World Cup happen. So the play 90 days. Can you believe it? What an amazing feat. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you did, you can get it on Apple, Acast, and Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. You can watch on Facebook and YouTube, and there will be loads of this to come. You're going to be reading about it for a long time, and hopefully it's going to go on the road and we'll be able to see it in lots of other places. In the meantime, my name is Bruce Aitchison from the Happiness Is podcast, and my happiness is egg-shaped. I'll see you all again very, very soon. Come on, Scotland!